Have you ever sat back and truly wondered why a woman who barely knows a man decides to sleep with him? If you ask society, the answer you get is always lazy, shallow, and completely surface level. You are told it's just basic lust, a sudden spark of chemistry, or maybe just a few drinks too many on a wild night out. But that mainstream narrative is an absolute lie designed to keep you blind. The real truth runs vastly deeper than physical attraction, and it is rooted in complex psychological forces that the vast majority of men are completely oblivious to. Because men are visual creatures, they assume women operate the exact same way, looking only at the immediate physical connection. When you look at the world through that flawed lens, you get caught entirely off guard by human behavior. You find yourself trapped in a loop of constant confusion, desperately trying to figure out why a woman who seemed completely obsessed with you for a few hours completely vanished into thin air the very next morning. Or, on the flip side, you end up bewildered as to why a woman you barely know suddenly clings to you with an intense, overwhelming desperation that doesn't make any logical sense. You try to rationalize it, you try to find a pattern, but you fail because you are looking at the wrong signals. This behavior isn't random, it isn't accidental, and it isn't a mystery that cannot be solved. It is a highly specific script coded directly into the darkest, deepest corners of female psychology. To truly master social dynamics, you have to realize that women rarely, if ever, act on pure, thoughtless impulse alone. While it may look spontaneous and reckless from the outside, their choices are actually guided by a complex web of subconscious calculations running constantly beneath the surface. These internal calculations are sometimes driven by a deep need for self protection, sometimes by hidden selfish desires, and occasionally by raw, self destructive urges that they themselves don't fully comprehend in the moment. The biggest mistake you can make right now is internalizing her actions and making them about your own worth. This has absolutely nothing to do with whether you are handsome enough, rich enough, or good enough as a man. It isn't a reflection of your value at all. Instead, it is entirely about her own internal wiring, her personal history, and the specific emotional triggers that happen to be dictating her choices on that exact night. When a woman surrenders her body to a stranger, she is moving toward an emotional state she craves, not necessarily toward the man standing in front of her. Most men spend their entire lives completely blind to this reality, treating intimacy like a game of checkers, when it is actually a high stakes game of psychological chess. The moment you finally learn to pull back the curtain and recognize these unspoken motives, the fog of confusion completely disappears from your life. You instantly stop making the fatal mistake of misinterpreting a few hours of intense, temporary attention as a sign of genuine, long term desire. You stop overanalyzing the texts, you stop torturing yourself over why she ghosted, and you finally gain the sharp, unshakable clarity that most men spend their entire lives chasing, but never find. Imagine how much power you hold when you no longer have to guess what a woman's behavior means. Instead of being an emotional hostage to her shifting moods, you begin to see the hidden patterns operating in the dark. You start to understand that intimacy is often a shield against loneliness, a weapon for validation, or an escape hatch from reality. When you can read these silent undercurrents, you protect your peace of mind and your heart. You no longer get fooled by the illusion of attraction because you can finally see the true, unvarnished human psychological needs driving the entire interaction from behind the scenes. The first major hidden driver behind this behavior is an absolute desperate need for validation. Now, to truly understand this, you have to look past the superficial, shallow attention a woman gets on a daily basis. This isn't about the cheap dopamine hit she receives from likes on an Instagram photo. And it isn't about the casual, low effort compliments thrown her way by random guys at a crowded bar. Those things are just background noise. What we are talking about here is something far heavier. It is a deep, pressing, and almost agonizing psychological hunger to feel specifically chosen, uniquely valued, and completely irreplaceable. We live in a highly competitive, ruthless world that constantly chips away at a woman's self worth, telling her she isn't young enough, beautiful enough, or successful enough. Over time, that constant societal pressure creates a profound internal deficit. For many women, intimacy becomes the ultimate shortcut to fix that deficit. It serves as undeniable, tangible proof that they still possess raw physical currency, that they still hold immense power over men, and that they are deeply desirable. When a woman is actively drowning in self doubt, whether she is silently reeling from a brutal breakup that shattered her confidence, or she has just survived months of feeling completely invisible, lonely, and unnoticed, intimacy becomes her absolute fastest psychological mechanism to frantically reclaim her lost self esteem. If you happen to step into her life at that exact psychological crossroads, the entire dynamic is already preset before you even open your mouth. If you say the right things, play your cards correctly, and look at her with an absolute piercing intensity that cuts through her social mask, something dangerous happens. You don't actually become her partner, you become her mirror. She isn't surrendering her body to you because she feels an overwhelming, soul deep physical connection to who you are as a person. Instead, she is using you as a tool to reflect back the specific image of herself that she is desperately starving to believe is true. She needs to look at your desire for her and use it to convince herself that she is still captivating, beautiful, and worthy of being wanted. In her mind, your intense attraction to her is the medicine that cures her insecurity for the night. For those few hours, your undivided attention shields her from her deepest fears of being inadequate or forgotten. This is exactly where men get the entire equation completely wrong and end up utterly devastated. Because you are blind to this hidden motive, you make the massive mistake of assuming she slept with you because she is deeply, genuinely into you. You think the passion of that night was the start of a real bond, but the harsh, unvarnished truth is that you were simply a convenient vessel for her self affirmation. You were the instrument she used to play a song of validation for herself. The moment the morning sun comes up, the illusion completely shatters. The temporary psychological high of that encounter inevitably wears off. The artificial confidence fades, and that heavy, familiar internal emptiness returns to her chest. When that happens, she doesn't associate you with love. She associates you with the vulnerability and insecurity that brought her to you in the first place. So she instinctively pulls away, cuts contact, or completely ghosts you. You are left entirely stranded in your own head, pacing the floor and feeling completely confused by her sudden, cold distance, never realizing that she didn't actually leave you. She just finished using the mirror. The second powerful, hidden reason why a woman will completely bypass her usual rules and sleep with a man she barely knows is the relentless pursuit of absolute escape. To truly understand this, you have to look closely at the crushing psychological weight the modern world places on women every single day. They exist under a nonstop, exhausting storm of deeply conflicting expectations that never lets up. Society demands that they be incredibly successful and driven in their careers, yet perfectly soft, nurturing, and submissive at home. They are told to be entirely fierce and independent, yet always available and accommodating to others. They are pressured to look flawless and beautiful, but never too provocative or available. This constant, impossible balancing act creates a massive, invisible prison inside a woman's mind. Day after day, she has to perform, manage her image, and carry a heavy load of responsibilities without ever showing a single crack in her armor. Over time, that pressure builds up into an unbearable internal suffocation. Sometimes the desire to drop that heavy burden becomes so overwhelming that intimacy is simply the quickest, most explosive door she can run through to completely forget her life for a single night. In those heated moments, you need to understand that you do not represent a traditional romantic partner, a future boyfriend, or a long term match. You represent something far more addictive. You represent absolute, unfiltered freedom from her everyday reality. This exact psychological phenomenon is the reason why highly responsible, intelligent women suddenly make choices that look entirely irrational, chaotic, and destructive to outsiders who are looking in. It explains why a completely dedicated mother with a beautiful family, or a highly polished, elite professional who has spent years building her career, will suddenly risk her entire reputation for a wild, chaotic encounter with a man who is far beneath her usual social or financial standards. To the outside world, this behavior looks totally reckless, shameful, and baffling. People wonder how someone with so much to lose could be so incredibly careless. But to her, in that exact moment, it isn't careless at all. It is survival. It is a carefully stolen moment in time where she can completely shed her exhausting everyday identity. For a few brief hours, she actively chooses to step out of the character she has to play for everyone else. She is deeply tired of being the reliable anchor, the perfect role model, the boss, or the woman everyone constantly depends on to hold everything together. She doesn't want to be responsible anymore. She just wants to feel completely alive, detached, and utterly unchained from the rules of her normal life. This is the exact psychological trap where most men get completely destroyed and left in total confusion. Because you felt an intense, undeniable heat and a raw, uninhibited passion during your time together, you make the massive mistake of confusing her temporary rebellion for permanent devotion. You think that because she let her guard down so completely with you, it means she wants to build a profound, lasting connection. But you are completely misreading the script. The very second the morning sun rises, reality ruthlessly crashes back in. The heavy chains of her real world responsibilities hook right back into her shoulders, and she has no choice but to step right back into the prison of her daily life. The moment she puts her responsible mask back on, she will treat you like an absolute stranger. She might ghost you, ignore your texts, or act completely cold, because looking at you reminds her of the reckless version of herself she needs to lock away. You are left feeling completely blindsided, hurt, and rejected as the intense passion you thought was real vanishes like smoke, never realizing that she didn't actually love you. She just loved the exit door you provided. The third deeply hidden motive you must understand is the quiet, invisible pursuit of power. To truly grasp this dynamic, you have to look past the typical narrative that women only seek safety, comfort, or romance. The truth is much more competitive. In a society where men often hold the most obvious, overt cards, whether through financial dominance, physical strength, or public authority, intimacy can become a highly effective, silent tool for a woman to completely bend male desire to her absolute will. It is a psychological game played in the shadows. When a man is consumed by intense lust, he drops his guard, loses his logic, and becomes completely vulnerable. For a woman, realizing that she possesses the sole key to unlock that level of male vulnerability gives her an immense sense of leverage. It is a quiet, intoxicating form of control. If a woman has spent years feeling systematically overlooked, underestimated, or completely dismissed by the people around her, her psychology will naturally look for a way to balance the scales. Choosing to give herself to a man, especially one who sits high on the social ladder, holds immense authority, or seems entirely out of reach to everyone else, provides her with an immediate, undeniable sense of psychological victory. You need to realize that for her, this specific type of encounter has absolutely nothing to do with mutual passion, romantic chemistry, or building a future together. It is a calculated conquest. This exact psychological drive perfectly explains why certain women are intensely, almost obsessively drawn to men of high status, men in positions of immense power, or even men who are already completely committed to someone else. It isn't always about the man himself. It is about what conquering that man represents. Breaking through the defenses of a powerful man or making a man violate his own rules and commitments just to have her provides a massive, addictive rush of control that she rarely gets to experience in her ordinary day to day life. It is the ultimate confirmation of her personal influence and sexual currency. She gets to walk away from the situation knowing that she held the remote control to a powerful man's emotions and actions, if only for a few intense hours. That feeling of absolute dominance burns itself deep into her memory and feeds her ego in a way that regular compliments never could. This is the exact psychological trap where unsuspecting men get completely blindsided and emotionally broken. Because you experienced an incredibly intense, passionate night, you open up your heart and assume you were chosen because of your unique personality, your soul, or a rare cosmic connection. But you are completely misreading the entire board. You weren't chosen for your soul. You were chosen because conquering you served as undeniable proof of her hidden influence. You were a symbol of achievement, not a soulmate. To her, you were a mountain to climb, a prize to win, and a validation of her hidden strength. The absolute second she realizes she has achieved total victory and that you are completely hooked, the challenge is over. The thrill of the chase dies, and her interest completely evaporates. If you fail to see this silent power play for what it truly is, you will make the fatal mistake of giving your deepest feelings and your heart away to a woman who was never looking for love. She was merely collecting a trophy to prove to herself that she could. The fourth and perhaps most profound reason why a woman will completely bypass her own rules to sleep with a man is a deep, overwhelming longing for raw connection. To truly understand this, you have to look past the surface level image of a woman who seems to have it all together. This isn't about the casual connection of small talk, flirting, or a fun night out. It is about a heavy, agonizing ache that comes from feeling utterly unseen and misunderstood while being surrounded by people every single day. We live in a fast paced digital world where true human depth is incredibly rare. A woman can easily walk through her daily life, surrounded by coworkers, friends, and family, yet remain completely isolated on the inside. Nobody asks her what she truly thinks. Nobody asks what she deeply fears, and nobody takes the time to peer behind her social mask. She carries her deepest secrets, her heavy doubts, and her silent anxieties completely alone. When that emotional isolation builds up for too long, the weight becomes absolutely crushing. In those moments, intimacy becomes the only sacred space left where she can temporarily drop her guard, stop pretending to be strong, and completely collapse into another human being just to feel grounded. You must realize that in these specific, fragile moments, she isn't offering you her body out of pure, aggressive lust. She is using physical intimacy to share her profound loneliness. If you happen to be the man who steps into her life during this heavy emotional storm, the dynamic becomes instantly charged. If you actually slow down, listen closely to what she is saying, and make her feel deeply safe and protected in your presence, the entire encounter will feel incredibly intense, raw, and completely unforgettable. It will feel like the kind of deep, spiritual bond that people write movies about. But this is exactly where men make a massive, fatal mistake in judgment. Because the emotional and physical energy was so overwhelming, you easily mistake her sudden emotional relief for the beautiful beginning of a long-term, committed relationship. You tell yourself that a connection that deep must mean she is falling for you. But the harsh, direct truth is that while it is a form of love, it is a temporary medicine for her pain, not a permanent foundation for a future. She didn't come to you because she was ready to build a life with you. She came to you because she desperately needed a lifeline to survive the night. She used the heat of your body to temporarily freeze the numbing coldness of her isolation. The absolute second the night ends and the morning sun forces you both back into reality, the artificial warmth of that encounter completely evaporates, and the heavy silence of her world returns. When that happens, her natural distance returns right along with it. She will pull away, become quiet, and treat the situation with a coldness that leaves you entirely shattered. You will find yourself pacing your room, completely heartbroken, trying to figure out what you did wrong or who else she might be seeing. But you need to understand that you aren't competing with another man in this scenario. You are competing with the deep, unhealed shadows of her own heart. She gave you her loneliness for one night, but when the night ended, she realized she still has to face her internal battles completely alone. If you don't learn to see the difference between a woman who genuinely desires you for who you are and a woman who is simply using intimacy as a temporary bridge to escape her own emptiness, you will keep giving your heart away to someone who is only reaching out for a moment of relief. None of these hidden psychological triggers make women malicious or evil, just as they don't automatically make men innocent victims in the game of modern dating. The truth is much more grounded. These hidden motives simply highlight how incredibly complicated, messy, and driven by unseen emotional wounds human beings truly are. We are all walking around carrying invisible baggage, searching for quick fixes to deep rooted internal problems. The ultimate tragedy of this dynamic is that the vast majority of men completely fail to see the bigger picture because they take physical intimacy entirely at face value. Because men are hardwired to view sex as a direct sign of attraction, they make the fatal mistake of treating a single, fleeting moment of female vulnerability as if it were a binding promise of forever. You convince yourself that because she opened up her world to you for one night, she must be yours. Then, when she inevitably snaps back to reality, changes her mind, and walks away without looking back, the resulting heartbreak cuts you straight to the bone. It destroys you internally, not just because you lost her, but because you never actually understood the real reason she was standing there in your room in the first place. You were reading a completely different script than she was. To survive and thrive in this landscape, you have to completely reprogram how you view attraction and accept the fact that intimacy is never just a simple physical act. It is deeply, undeniably psychological.